Hello, everyone. I'm Mariana Katsarova. I'm the founder of Raw in War, Ritual Women in War. It's a small but loud human rights organization based in London, which for many years, since 2007, has been awarding and celebrating brave women. They could be actually from any profession, working in armed conflict and war zones and bravely standing up for the victims of these conflicts. We're privileged and really grateful for the opportunity to take part in the first global WOW festival over 24 hours. Our session has been part of the WOW festival for at least 7 years now. And it's called Refusing to be Silenced. I'm joined here today by several extraordinary women, winners of the Anna Politkovskaya Award from different parts of the world. The first one is Alex Crawford. Alex received the Anna Politkovskaya Award last year. Alex has been covering most of the brutal conflicts of the past 30 years. She was decorated with many awards. She was bravely covering the Ebola crisis a few years back. Svetlana Alexeyevich is a writer from Belarus. Svetlana received the 2015 Nobel Prize for Literature. She's been documenting the stories, the testimonies of thousands of Soviet people, their recollection of the war, the World War II, their recollection of the Chernobyl disaster, end of life in the changing breakup of the Soviet Union. She was persecuted for her book, The Zinc Boys, the book about the voices of the Soviet soldiers participating in the Afghan war. She was tried. She had to go into exile for 11 years, but she returned to Belarus, and we have Svetlana in Minsk today with us. Jeanette Bedoya Lima is the voice of Jeanette. Is it more than 2 million women in Colombia who were subjected to sexual violence during the more than half a century armed conflict in Colombia? She is now the deputy editor of one of the biggest newspapers in Colombia called El Tiempo. She was abducted twice by rebels in the course of doing her journalism work. She was one of these abductions ended up for Jeanette being gang raped by rebels and left for dead on the side of the road. Through what happened to Jeanette, the rebels wanted to warn all journalists in Colombia that this is what will happen to anybody who wants to investigate their atrocities and their war crimes. Every year on 25th of May, Jeanette, which is the day when Jeanette was abducted and gang raped, Jeanette organizes this moving event and ceremony. She works with women who became victims of sexual violence in the conflict in Colombia. Her campaign is called No es hora de calar. It's not the time to remain silent. Very similar to our discussion today, refusing to be silenced. We've been locked in our individual caves in the world because of the coronavirus. However, the coronavirus, when talking about COVID-19, we started using war terminology. The Secretary General of the UN had a call at the beginning of the pandemic to all warring sides in all conflicts in the world, please introduce a ceasefire, at least for the duration of the coronavirus. What we saw in the past 3 months of lockdown was that many countries continued and many rebels and many warring sides continued the conflict. The victims of each conflict always have been the women and the girls to begin with, women and children. They're also the displaced people. With the coronavirus, 80 million displaced persons in the world have been counted by UNHCR. The borders have been closed, so refugees are not crossing borders, but people are still fleeing from conflict. Women and girls are still continuing to be violated by rebels and rebel armies alike. The coronavirus effect we will be seeing in the long term. Why we are discussing it today is because it reminds us of any other war that all of us have been witnessing. What are your thoughts about this pandemic, how it had affected our lives, and what kind of world are we going to enter once the pandemic ends, we hope? On the background of this coronavirus, we had an eruption of protests in the United States. We had the Black Lives Matter movement, people joining despite the fear of the pandemic. And we will hear from a special guest who is not yet our winner of the Anna Politkovska Award, an extraordinary woman, Sister Helen Prejean. She's probably the biggest campaigner in the United States against the death penalty. She's also the author of Dead Man Walking, the Oscar-winning Hollywood film. So we'll hear from her about the pandemic and also the call and action for justice and reform of the system, the police and criminal justice system in the US. Maybe we could watch a couple of minutes of your film, Alex, in the beginning about the home front, the coronavirus in the UK.
I've spent a lot of my career covering wars all over the world. Now I'm back in Britain, which is on a war footing and facing the biggest threat to the nation in generations.
There is fear, but also grit and guts and a lot of humanity on Britain's home front. The hospital's intensive care unit has more than doubled in size, spilling over into adjoining rooms.
I'm determined. I don't want to be a statistic in this.
Another incredible success for the ICU, and each one that leaves this area is celebrated wildly.
Julia Cotter is a midwife and a single parent of two.
And I got worse and worse and worse. So I came in on Sunday in an ambulance, really unwell, felt terrible. I honestly didn't think I'd be going home. And they've been brilliant.
In one of Warrington's family-run funeral companies, it's non-stop. Once the bodies are loaded into coffins, those are sealed. But still, nothing's taken for granted. Even the outside is disinfected again and again.
How much more the COVID deaths are than what the official figure is, from your evidence?
At least double.
I would say we're close to double.
Mm-hmm. This used to be a theatre. Now it's just a storeroom. It gives you an illustration of just how much has been cancelled and sacrificed because of dealing with COVID-19.
Far fewer people are turning up for life-saving treatment. But Ernie Burns isn't one of them. It's going to take more than a deadly virus to deter him from his treatment.
I miss my grandchildren as well. I haven't been able to hook with them or anything like that for a long, long time, and I miss them terribly.
This pandemic has bound the planetary population in a common crisis. Different degrees, undoubtedly, but also a national collective enduring.
Warrington is like so many towns and communities up and down Britain. Of course, they're different, they're unique, they've got their own individuality, but they're also all the same. Everyday people in everyday communities coping with some quite extraordinary times and doing it with incredible fortitude.
But once this clapping stops, like in any war, there'll be questions to answer about the tactics, propaganda and collateral damage. It takes nothing away from those fighting this disease. It makes them even more heroic.
Thank you, NHS.
The ones you've heard from are those who lived. The questions later might centre around how many more could have been saved.
Alex, we're used to seeing you in conflict zones covering war and conflict. You were even shelled by government forces last year in Idlib in Syria. Now we're seeing you running in the new theater of COVID. I mean, you said it yourself, we're even using military terminology when talking about the pandemic. Is the pandemic a new form of war for you? What do you think?
I think certainly the British government deployed a lot of war terminology. They wanted to, it seemed to me that they wanted to try and stoke up a patriotism. And sometimes it felt, quite a lot of the time, it felt that the war terminology was being used as a cover. It was all the idea, the message that they were trying to put out, the propaganda that they were trying to put out was that this is a war, we're all in it together, we can't do anything about it, we must all fight together. I'd covered the start of the coronavirus from China earlier that year in January from Hong Kong. And when I was covering it there, everyone was wearing masks. They very quickly took a grip of the situation. The pro-democracy demonstrators did not go out on the streets in the interests of trying to stop the virus. And they have extraordinarily low numbers of deaths. They have something like 4 deaths in Hong Kong from coronavirus. Now, they have 14 to 16 border points with China, which was the epicenter, the start of coronavirus. And now, even if those figures are massaged, and let's face it, almost every government in the world is massaging the figures to a certain extent, those are still extraordinarily small figures. But there was the view from Britain was that that was a long way away. It's not going to happen here. And as it swept across Europe, through Italy, Spain, and they still had plenty of time, plenty of warning. I'm based in Turkey. My children went into distance learning in early February. I arrived in Britain on the day of the lockdown, having left Istanbul Airport, one of the biggest airports in the world, which had basically been mothballed, and it felt like all the world's borders were slamming down by the hour. I arrived and there were 3 flights still working from Istanbul Airport. One of them was to London. One was to somewhere in Ukraine, I believe, and the other one was to somewhere else in Eastern Europe. There were only 3 flights working, and one of them was to London. Everyone got on that flight wearing masks, even the crew. We landed in London as the day that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, announced the lockdown, and no one was wearing masks. We were like the weirdos wearing masks. It felt like the whole country was very much in denial. They were all out and about in parks, going running. Everyone was terribly confused about the messaging. And I remember talking to my news editor saying, I really don't understand what's going on in Britain, because everyone seems to be acting like there isn't this killer virus around. And then it became very apparent that the government was making mistake after mistake and basically putting out a lot of very muddled messages. That's the kindest thing you can say about it. If I had been covering a totalitarian state, this is exactly how it would have been operating. And yet I was in Britain, which was meant to be democratic, meant to be transparent, and they prided themselves on freedom of speech. I think they were all living in a very strange cuckoo land where coronavirus was used to stop the questioning of the elected members of parliament. Parliament shut down. It suddenly became very controlled from a setup where they had, not most of the time, not even the prime minister, but set people, sometimes scientists, sometimes chief nurses, usually one cabinet minister, and the journalists were picked and chosen remotely by, they all tuned in on their, like we're doing now, by Zoom or by other methods. They weren't allowed follow-up questions. That came much later. It was extremely controlled. And actually, I found the whole setup very, very worrying. So it was obviously not a war in terms of bombs, bullets, minefields, and the sort of atmosphere that I'd normally find myself, or much of the time, reporting on in Syria, Iraq, or whatever. But this was a very different kind of war, and it felt to me like the normal citizens were losing out on it, and they didn't even realize. They were still under the illusion that most of their elected members were not going to tell them lies. If this was happening in a different area, China or the Philippines, there would have been foreign correspondents shouting malpractice and accusing them of lying and accusing them of misleading propaganda. And it wasn't happening in Britain. I thought it was really, really very strange and very, very worrying. And very quickly it emerged that the numbers of mistakes, the lack of preparation were being borne out with the very, very high numbers of infection, the very, very high securing residential figures were just rising and rising and rising. And then very soon, despite all the attempts to try and persuade the population to socially distance, to stay at home, not to go to work, there was a very big impact on the economy. But it became apparent very early on when the Prime Minister, the Health Secretary, one of the key Chief Scientific Officer, I think, the Chief Medical Officer, all got coronavirus. The three people who'd been leading the press conferences, all got coronavirus within a few weeks. So I felt like a victim as a population, foreign correspondent that the country had changed beyond my recognition. There were so many issues that were bubbling along there. And one of which was a huge amount of control from NHS England, Scotland and Wales about access into any hospital or any area where you could actually see for yourself what was going on, which I think is a very, very worrying development.
I think we'll have a chance to talk more about this with the others when we have a discussion. Let's hear from Svetlana next. One of your most extraordinary books, although all of the five are truly extraordinary, is about the Chernobyl disaster and how people in Ukraine and Belarus coped with it. You visited a number of times bravely Chernobyl when it was a cut-off militarized zone just after the explosion of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. What are your thoughts now that we're yet in another situation with this coronavirus? We were just talking with Alex that for the government, but also for many of us, it felt like on the barricade of some invisible war. How about for you, who knew how Chernobyl looked like and felt like?
Да, я слушала Алекс и думала об одном таком случае. Я слышала, когда в Барселоне Горбачеву задали вопрос, как вы могли, когда уже все в мире знали, что взорвался Чернобыль, мы могли разрешать первомайские демонстрации, могли торговать пончиками на улице, люди играли в футбольные матчи. И вдруг встает Горбачев и совершенно, я думаю, это было искренне, растерянно говорит: ну, понимаете, я же послал туда лучших людей, вот кто занимался, целый самолет ученых. Вот. И они поехали туда, и они ехали на ядерный взрыв, но думали, что это обычный взрыв. Они не взяли даже бритвенных приборов с собой, чтобы, понимая, что им придется там остаться некоторым на месяцы, а некоторым и на годы. Второе, он говорит, мне говорят те, кто был на взрывах ядерных бомб, говорят мне: да ничего, вот тут взрыв, а потом прошло какое-то время, мы пьем красное вино, и все в порядке. И он говорит: в кого я мог еще спросить? Я о чем? Я о том, что перед человечеством совершенно новые испытания. Ужас принял совершенно новые формы. То, что мы пользуемся военной терминологией, говорит о том, что у нас нет еще новой терминологии, как назвать вот это, ну, скажем так, новое зло, новые формы ужаса. И человечество в растерянности и в целом растерянности. В растерянности, вот я видела это первые годы у себя, как были растеряны военные, как были растеряны ученые, как были растеряны чиновники, власть вся была растеряна. То есть существует некий определенный фонд знания культуры вот на сегодняшний день, такой сундук, скажем, с рукописями. Вот, со старыми рукописями. Вот наша культура на моих глазах в Чернобыле превратилась в сундук со старыми рукописями. Стало понятно, что ничего нового нет. Я видел на своих глазах, как ученые, я уже не говорю о военных солдатах, которых посылали графит лопатами, там пару минут грести наверху крыши, как они все срывали маски. Маски болтались у них на шее. А это все были смертельные совершенно варианты. То есть, я думаю, тут клубок из авторитарности, как бы, но в то же время общее некое незнание. Я плохо себе представляю, что даже тот же Горбачев действительно сознательно делал то, что он сделал. Да, и то же самое в Англии было, то же самое, я думаю, происходит и в Белоруссии сейчас, потому что любая форма диктатуры – это, конечно, монокультурная форма правления. И поэтому люди были совершенно не готовы к тому, что произошло. Я помню первые дни, когда я была, вот и первые месяцы даже, и идет со мной дозиметрист и говорит: мы очень устали, он говорит: на траву садиться нельзя, земля убьет, трава убьет. Вы понимаете, вот само название этих слов: трава убьет, земля убьет. Когда ты хочешь скупнуться в реке, боже мой, ни в коем случае, вода убьет. Когда ты хочешь там яблоки сорвать, ни в коем случае, это все вас убьет. Вы понимаете, что вы существуете совершенно в новом мире, для которого у вас ничего не приспособлено. Нет обоняния, оно не годится, потому что радиация не пахнет. Вы не можете ее потрогать, она не материальна. Вы не можете ее назвать, ваша культура не годится. Что-то похожее, я думаю, и происходит сейчас. Конечно, существует какое-то знание о таких трагедиях 20 века, как испанка, которая миллионы людей унесла смерти. Но вы понимаете, все это было не оформлено в некое такое гуманитарное знание, некое такое знание популярное, что ли. Вот оно было отодвинуто в сторону медицинского. И люди, в общем-то, не понимали, что с ними происходит. Я думаю, что-то такое и сегодня происходит. Вот у нас сегодня, говорят, в Белоруссии опять поднялось количество зараженных. и все больницы забиты больными людьми. Но вы пройдите по улице, так, наверное, ну, из 50 1-2 человека носят маски, больше никто не носит маски. Я думаю, что вот это новое знание, с которым связано наше новое время, время, в котором мы же существуем, оно еще неосознанно нами. И я думаю, тут, конечно, вот и Алекс, наверное, согласится со мной, и мы, журналисты, наверное, должны быть в каком-то смысле и критиковать, конечно, то, что происходит, а с другой стороны, как-то быть популяризаторами этого нового знания. Конечно, мы сами не так много понимаем из того, что происходит, но нам наверняка надо и придется и готовиться к тому, что мы будем жить в мире пандемии, что мир сегодня будет таков, будут меняться климатические условия, будут таять льды, в которых бог весть какие микробы и что там хранится, и все это хлынет к нам, хлынут климатические беженцы. Нам надо привыкать жить с этими новыми вызовами. И, конечно, наблюдая за тем, что было и во время Чернобыля, и во время Фукусимы, я тоже там была, и то, что сейчас происходит, я могу констатировать только неготовность, вот, в общем-то, всех нас к тому, что с нами происходит.
Thank you, Svetlana. Let's hear next from Jeanette, and we will have a chance to discuss a little bit. Jeanette is here.
Un saludo muy especial a todos desde Colombia. Son días de difíciles pruebas, no solamente por el coronavirus. Creo que esto que está afrontando el mundo, esta pandemia, llegó para medir realmente cuál es el potencial de nuestra capacidad humana. Hasta dónde vamos a ser capaces de transformarnos y de transformar el mundo en el que estamos. Y los periodistas, indudablemente, tenemos una gran responsabilidad. Hablando en esos términos militares, tengo que decir que los periodistas estamos en la primera línea de fuego del coronavirus, porque gracias a quienes comunican, hoy el mundo se entera de lo que está pasando en medio de esta pandemia. Y creo que no pensamos mucho en qué circunstancias están trabajando los periodistas, cómo se están autoprotegiendo, qué garantías les están dando los gobiernos para que puedan hacer su trabajo. Y algo muy difícil que estamos viviendo en nuestra región, me refiero a América Latina, es que el coronavirus desató otra pandemia que ya vivimos en el mundo, la violencia contra las mujeres. Hoy, precisamente, en Colombia, estamos sepultando a 2 mujeres y una niña de 4 años que fueron asesinadas por los hombres que decían amarlas. Y está ocurriendo en Argentina, en México, en Estados Unidos, ocurrió en Francia, en Italia, porque la pandemia obligó a que las mujeres tuvieran que convivir con sus agresores. Y creo que ese es uno de los efectos colaterales más difíciles de afrontar en este momento. Prepararnos para cubrir una guerra muchas veces resulta más fácil. Y Alex lo sabe y Svetlana lo saben porque simplemente viene el combate, te enteras del enfrentamiento, tomas tus elementos, tu cámara, tu chaleco antibalas cuando lo tienes y sales a cubrir la guerra. Y sabes que de pronto no puedes regresar a casa. Pero cuando llega un enemigo al que tú no le puedes ver ni el armamento, ni el tanque, ni el helicóptero, es muy difícil saber qué va a pasar, cuál es el siguiente paso en esa guerra. Y es un reto muy grande para nosotras como periodistas y para quienes están enfrentando esta guerra. Yo sí lo veo como una guerra, con un enemigo que te muestra además mil caras, porque, porque no te lo esperabas, porque no lo imaginabas de esa manera. En abril, en Colombia, cuando iniciamos el aislamiento, a mí me tocó afrontar la muerte de una de mis amigas y una de las voluntarias más cercanas a la campaña que yo lidero, a No es hora de callar. Y fue un golpe muy duro porque tuvimos que hacer su sepelio a través de Zoom. Le tuvimos que decir adiós a través de esta pantalla. El único que pudo recibir sus restos fue su esposo. Y eso te confronta con tu responsabilidad frente a las personas que no son cercanas a ti, a quienes tú les estás informando, a quienes les estás dando el mensaje de cómo hay que cuidarse, de cómo usar un tapabocas, de cómo autoprotegerse para proteger a los tuyos, pero también de cómo enfrentar la incertidumbre por lo que viene. Y ese es otro de los grandes retos que tenemos, porque el coronavirus nos enseñó y a algunos nos ratificó que lo único que tenemos es este segundo. No tenemos más. Porque puede arrasar con nosotros y con media humanidad en un abrir y cerrar de ojos. Y para quienes comunicamos, ese es el reto más grande. Primero, para defender nuestra libertad de expresión. En algunos países, efectivamente, se ha sentido mucho más fuerte esa represión sobre la información que se genera del coronavirus, pero en otros, la responsabilidad de qué es lo que estamos informando y cómo lo estamos informando, creo que indudablemente nos ha puesto a prueba y nos ha dejado una responsabilidad muy grande. Y quiero volver a hacer énfasis en esa pandemia paralela, en la de la violencia contra las mujeres, porque cuando pase toda esta crisis y podamos hacer cuentas del impacto que dejó en nuestros países esta pandemia, creo que el número de víctimas por la violencia de género desatada en medio de esta crisis van a ser muy altas y nos va a poner a prueba sobre qué debemos hacer también sobre eso, sobre cómo hay una palabra que se está usando mucho y que no me gusta en este caso, que es reinventarse. El gobierno colombiano todos los días en una alocución presidencial nos insisten en la palabra de reinventarse. Y yo creo que nuestro límite o nuestra prueba no es reinventarnos, es cómo vamos a volver a construir. Y esa es la mayor prueba de todas, cómo vamos a volver a construir.
Jeanette, what happened during the pandemic? Did the men with guns finally stop raping women in the conflict in Colombia? What happened with the women victims? Or that became even driven further underground and the silence is total?
Lamentablemente, Mariana, el confinamiento y el supuesto silenciamiento de las armas durante la pandemia lo que hizo fue exacerbar la violencia sexual contra las mujeres. Porque estos grupos armados han podido actuar muy en silencio, sin tener encima la operación militar, sin tener encima la persecución de las autoridades, y lo que han hecho es ir a las poblaciones, entrar silenciosamente a las casas, intimidar a las mujeres, y hay muchos datos que aún no tenemos. No podemos salir, no podemos viajar, todos los vuelos están cancelados, no hemos podido ir a las regiones donde atendemos a las mujeres para saber cuál es su situación. Los pocos datos que tenemos nos llegan por WhatsApp, pero también son mujeres muy pobres que no pueden tener una base de datos, un programa de datos para sus teléfonos móviles, y es muy difícil la comunicación. Pero el impacto en medio de la confrontación armada también ha sido muy, muy difícil. Y algo también muy complicado es que, a pesar de que se habló que durante el coronavirus se iban a parar las agresiones, en estos 90 días de confinamiento que llevamos, en Colombia han asesinado a más de 10 líderes y lideresas sociales, mujeres que luchan por los derechos humanos de las comunidades. Así que para nosotros ha sido muy difícil, y el balance al final del día va a ser muy, muy complejo.
Yeah, a lot remains to be done, but it's getting even more difficult to get justice. But I mean, your campaign, as it remains. It's not time to be silent. And let's hear from the video of Sister Helen Prejean, because what happened in the United States was yet another place we didn't expect that people in millions will walk to the streets after the murder in front of our eyes of George Floyd by the police in Minneapolis. And when their president ordered the troops in against peaceful demonstrations, well, what more than another war zone was waiting to happen?
Hello, I'm so glad to be a part of this. I'm Sister Helen Prejean. I've been engaged in raising my voice in the community to end the death penalty around the world. Since in the 1980s, I witnessed a human being being electrocuted to death in Louisiana's killing chamber. And I've just finished writing a book, River of Fire, where I talk about the waking up process of how I moved from being a passive, obedient nun to authority above me and praying for the problems of the world, to one fully engaged in being a voice and participating in helping to change the world, always changing, of course, myself. And in River of Fire, I talk the fire of the book, which is the passion in our life, which is how we come alive to the purpose in our life. Was the witnessing of this man being electrocuted to death. In the preface of the book, it goes, they killed a man with fire one night. They strapped him in a wooden chair, pumped electricity through his body until he was dead. His killing was a legal act. No religious leaders protested the killing that night, but I saw it with my own eyes, and what I saw set my soul on fire, a fire that burns in me still. And so I began leaving that execution chamber to speak, and then I wrote the book, Dead Man Walking, and began to work from there. There's a saying in Latin America that what the eye does not see, the heart cannot feel. It is that we have to come close to the suffering and the injustice and witness it, that then we catch on fire and we can then be a voice. As all the women participating in this conference, in these war zones, that become a voice for the girls, for the women, for the people suffering. And it's a voice that refuses to be stopped because of what their eyes have seen and their souls have felt, and the deep commitment of their lives. We are experiencing in the United States now, and it's amazing, it's affecting the whole world, but there are certain powers in the universe, emergence, evolution, One of the powers of the universe is what is called cataclysm. And it's just when all the pins get knocked out from all the systems and you have free fall in economics, in the social system, in the criminal justice system, in healthcare and everything. We're going through that in the United States, and it's a conjoining of two big forces meeting. The awareness, deep awareness of racism in the killing of George Floyd, where there was a smartphone and a video where we all could witness the 8 minutes and 46 seconds in which these two policemen knelt on this man and he's saying, "I can't breathe." He even called out for his mother. We witnessed that suffering. And so the police have been killing people for years. In Dead Man Walking, I wrote about living in the St. Thomas housing projects and watching what the police were doing to Black men, what they were doing to Black people. But white people were part. But this, everybody saw. And so you also have here with Black Lives Matter that really gave us the template. 2013, Michael Brown was killed by the police in Ferguson, Missouri. And the template was given of people with their hands up with nonviolent protests in honor of Michael Brown's killing in Ferguson. Black Lives Matter began, and that is now reaping a harvest. With the killing of George Floyd, the whole world started erupting. You always have to have soil tilled before a crop and a harvest of justice comes. Black Lives Matter began doing that. And so, and it's incredible what's happening now because we are beginning to question many systems in the United States. The militarization of police happens because you have an unjust structures where 40 million people plus have been kept in poverty in the United States and without health care. The only way you keep that in place is you militarize. And in the United States, that's taken the most direct form of police. So what's now, cop shows on TV, all the cop shows are being questioned. Crime started going down in the early 90s, and the proliferation of crime shows has multiplied in movies and on TV. They're being questioned now, where cops were always held up as heroes. They never dealt with the systemic racism. They also never dealt with holding police accountable when they had killed a fellow citizen, and there were no means of accountability. But now the voices are rising in every level. And what's interesting is in President Trump, you have the rise of authoritarianism, where he's clearly calling to send in the National Guard, to send in the military, against the protesters, against the citizens. And then you have the huge backlash to that that's happened. Now you have members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the military people, refuting what Trump is saying, even apologizing for their actions. And when you have members of the military joining with the people in the protest, you have real social change happening. So we see in the criminal justice system, we've been seeing the racism for years. Overwhelmingly, it's been when white people were killed in the United States, 8 out of every 10 cases. That's when the death penalty was sought. Never when a Black person was killed in a neighborhood. That's a negligible life. And if you don't uphold the equality and dignity of that life, you're not going to be outraged over that death. Only some deaths merit the outrage of an ultimate penalty of death. So it's all getting exposed in a new way now as we're dealing with both the racism and the pandemic. With Black people, because the healthcare has been so miserable, so non-existent, a lot of Black people don't even know they have high blood pressure, that they have the underlying causes, with diabetes or whatever that make them vulnerable to the pandemic. So when a pandemic hits, they die the most. With the police, they die the most. And clearly in so many ways, because poverty and racism is a form of violence, they've been dying without a word, silently, because of the violence of poverty. I mean, people without health care die sooner than people who have health care, or the infant mortality rate. So now there's just this new moment of awareness. And because of having social media, it can be so prevalent among so many of us. And you see grassroots organizations rising up and organizing. There is no one center where there's organizations coming from the top down for Black Lives Matter. The top sellers on Amazon are all books about racism and white people beginning to wake up to racism. So you have Kendi's book stamped from the beginning of how Black people have been stamped as inferior being from the very beginning, and the Constitution mirrors that. There's also a book called White Fragility, of why white people never want to say, oh, I'm a racist. All of this advancement of consciousness and understanding then leads to an informed public that can then take action. And now we have the passion and fire because we have been so outraged in the witnessing. I've been part of protests now to call for change in the police system. The term for it is defunding police, but what we really mean by that is to shift all those funds from militarizing a police force into help for the mentally ill, help for the homeless. Why is it, are you sending policemen in when a mentally ill person is acting out in public? I mean, we've had case after case. They come in with tasers and guns. That's not an answer to a mentally ill person. So I'm very happy about what is happening. The death penalty has been shifting for the last 10, 15 years. The public is no longer supporting. It's lost energy. It's lost its fire, and it's on its way out. It can't happen soon enough, because when people don't see what it means to torture and kill a human being, then their hearts can't be moved. And that's why all of us who are voices, who are the witnesses our eyes have seen, and we become the voices. That's a moral imperative for us. That's why we're never going to stop, because we have to, because of what we've seen and heard and know, to be that voice. It's a real honor to be alongside people who have been risking, women there on the front lines in journalism and all, risking their lives to be in the middle of a war and giving voice to those voices that can't cry out. I'm on my knees, really, in humility to be joined with you. And thank you, all the organizers. It takes a whole team to make this happen. And thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Listening to Sister Helen, a bit of a discussion, if we have a little bit of time, a few minutes. Maybe the coronavirus has given us this unique chance, as Sister Helen said, to expose things in a new way. And I was thinking, are we actually given the chance to reshape this kind of quite ill world full of violence against women, violence against everybody who's different, violence and racism? Maybe now we could really reshape this world, and we could finally have this harvest of justice, which Sister Helen was talking about. So what do you think?
Well, I certainly hope so, Mariana. I really, really hope so. I think everyone, absolutely everyone was affected. Everyone, didn't matter where you were. I mean, I was in Britain getting messages from my friends in Yemen and Syria, Afghanistan and Pakistan asking if I was okay in Britain. Someone from Yemen was asking me if I was okay in what should have been a first world country with a much more sophisticated health system and infrastructure. It drew everyone together because everyone was suffering variations of the same dangers and risks. And I think because of that, this immense frustration, which has been building up for many years, what is different about this death? Undoubtedly, social media made a big difference. But two, it was the coronavirus. People were so frustrated. They'd been under lockdown for many months. Unless you were in New Zealand, you were very disenchanted with the way your government, the authorities, were dealing with the whole pandemic. It was like someone switched on the light and reminded them that they had this disgusting history of slavery. They had revered prime ministers on pedestals who were responsible for the deaths of millions through starvation in some country which probably seemed like a long way away in back in the day, but now we can see on our phones on a daily basis what's happening in, for instance, Bangladesh or other areas. And this really was, I think this has been a massive awakening too. I don't think it's a coincidence, Mariana, that in Britain in particular, there was a very high number of health workers who died because they didn't have proper protective equipment. And amongst those high numbers of health workers was a very, very high number of BAME people who died, who were in those health workers, those key worker jobs. And that also really galvanized the whole movement in Britain and also made people think, why are these people dying? Why are they in some of the low paid jobs? Why are they doing all the front round servicing? What is it that's making them die so much more in such higher numbers, disproportionately higher numbers to the white health workers, for instance, or just generally the white population? If anything good comes out of coronavirus, it is that it joins people together in trying to tackle racism at a more fundamental level.
And you, Jeanette, you have been fighting for justice for many years. Any chance for a harvest of justice in Colombia, not just for you, but for all these 2 million women victims of sexual violence in the conflict?
Yo creo que la esperanza que no perdemos es lograr algún día justicia. En medio de estos días de encierro, he querido soñar, porque tú sabes que mis secuestradores mataron hasta mis sueños, y he querido soñar que esto realmente va a sacudir a la gente y la va a hacer pensar de otra manera. La va a hacer reflexionar sobre cómo ven el mundo, sobre cómo habitan el mundo, sobre cómo tienen que recibir el mundo y cambiarlo. Pero cuando viene mi parte racional, me doy cuenta que más de la mitad de la humanidad no va a entender cuál fue el mensaje de este coronavirus. Porque es increíble, y hablo en el caso de Colombia, cuando veíamos las imágenes de Italia y de España con la cantidad de cadáveres por el virus, salíamos al balcón a las 8 de la noche a aplaudir a esos médicos que estaban allí atendiendo a las víctimas. Y cuando la emergencia llegó a Colombia y empezamos a tener muchos contagiados, a los médicos empezaron a amenazarlos. Hay médicos que tuvieron que salir huyendo con sus familias porque les amenazaron, porque los ven como un riesgo y no como una ayuda. Entonces es cuando te preguntas, ¿cómo no estoy entendiendo lo que está ocurriendo hoy en el mundo? Y espero que quienes tienen en sus manos la posibilidad de hacer justicia entiendan que este es el momento, que es lo que les han puesto en las manos para dar una respuesta a años y años de impunidad. Y creo que ese es el sueño y ese es la esperanza que no podemos perder. Para quienes hacemos activismo, para quienes hacemos periodismo, no podemos perder esa esperanza. Que esta prueba nos permita entender cómo tenemos que aportarle al mundo.
And Svetlana,
мое главное впечатление, которое было в эти дни пандемии, сейчас оно, когда включаешь телевизор, и кто-нибудь из русских генералов или Путин начинает хвастаться, что у нас такая ракета, у нас, дескать, такой танк, такая подлодка, какой нет даже в Америке. И это было так странно слышать, потому что то, что происходило вокруг, вот этот вирус, который покорил мир в течение нескольких месяцев, ведь он же на самом деле превратил все эти военные вещи, чем они хвастаются, в игрушки. Потому что ни одна армия не могла бы за пару месяцев завоевать мир. То, что сделал, то есть коронавирус. И для меня тогда стало очевидным, чтобы поменять мир, сделать новый мир, нужны новые мысли, новые убеждения. Только из них может произрасти что-то другое. И я вспомню, что когда случился Чернобыль, у нас как раз это 90-е годы, и народ на одних выборах проголосовал ужасно. Он опять проголосовал за коммунистов. И один из философов наших, Корякин, воскликнул, когда у него спросили, а что нужно, чтобы народ проснулся? И он вдруг сказал, 100 Чернобылей надо, тогда народ проснулся. Я помню, испугалась его слов, но я думаю, что, к сожалению, так устроен человек, что надо долго накопление какого-то знания, чтобы он пришел каким-то к открытиям, к этим новым убеждениям, которые могут подарить новый мир, о котором только мечтаешь.
Thank you very much. I think we have run out of time, went over time even, but it was very important to hear your voices. And I think I'm coming out of this discussion actually hopeful. I started at being depressed and thinking, oh my God, let's get over with it and just say how miserable we feel in this coronavirus. But, you know, listening to all of you, knowing that there are demonstrations on the streets and protests while Svetlana is speaking here in Minsk, knowing that Jeanette's quest for justice is continuing, and she always was the voice, but now even more so, she continues with her campaign. Alex, who has turned Western Europe into a home front, she hasn't turned it, she's covering it as if she's covering Syria. And Sister Helen, our candidate for the next Pope, when it will be a woman. I think that with our voices and with the voices of so many other remarkable women who are refusing to be silenced, despite the coronavirus, despite millions of Chernobyls, Ebola viruses, and wars, I think we're strong together. And I'm coming out of this absolutely energized, as Sister Helen said, with the passion of fire. And I think that's what we're doing as women, as journalists, as voices, for all those people who, and all those women and girls who are voiceless. Thank you so much. Moving on. Thank you.